Alright, welcome to another episode of This Week in Overwatch, where I'll be going over all the shenanigans that have been occurring and everything adjacent to Overwatch. So social media, forums, Reddit, everything that's being discussed about and on Overwatch. Now, it has been 2 weeks. I've taken a stream break, so it's been a while since I've been gone and a lot has gone down. So we're going to cover everything that's been talked about or happening since I have been gone, and a lot of shit has been going down. So first and foremost, the news that has rippled through the Overwatch community talk about a self-healing passive for all roles. Now, I'll read Aaron's tweet and then we'll discuss what some people have said and I'll discuss my thoughts on the issue. So firstly, Aaron Keller tweets, self-healing passive for all roles, question mark, exclamation mark, question mark. We're back with the first director's take of 2024. It's the first in a series going over the values and vision for the coming year, and there's a few juicy nuggets in it. Check it out. This instantly causes a lot of furore in the community. People are very skeptical. They're very upset. So what I thought was the funniest response that I want to share with you guys was Slasher, the esports journalist that many of you will know about, who writes, with all due respect, Aaron, this is not a direction or mechanic Jeff would have ever implemented into Overwatch. Keep his spirit alive and reconsider. I think this is hilarious for many reasons. One, Jeff is not dead. Jeff isn't dead. I mean, we should know. For those who don't know, Slasher is a very prominent esports journalist, has definitely had a lot of great articles and reportings, but is a bit of a moron. And you should largely expect some Pepega takes from him. And this is hilarious in the sense that it sounds like a eulogy. It sounds like Jeff died and Aaron is crushing his spirit. It's like his shitting all over his legacy or something. It's like, A, Jeff is alive. B, Aaron Keller has worked with Jeff since the launch of Overwatch and before that. I love the idea that some pretty flimsily accredited esports journalist is going to go up on twitter.com and be like, Aaron, this is not what Jeff would have wanted. It's like, my man, the audacity of telling someone, one of their best friends, how they would have approached a thing that they helped make together. So, unfortunately, there was a lot of reactions like this, which causes Aaron to immediately kind of not backtrack, but I think qualify his initial statement. He says, clarifying a few things with the self-heal. It's one part of a much larger set of changes coming to the game in Season 9. Internally, we're talking about and targeting some of these changes at damage spikiness in-game, the role of DPS in securing kills, and the strength of healing. Clearly, the backlash causes Aaron to want to assuage some fears. People were obviously panicking, and we'll look at the actual director's take in a second. But first, two more creator takes I want to share with you. So ML7, the GOAT, comes in and says, while I love that they are experimenting with stuff, it might be time to just remove role passes from everyone in Overwatch 2 and rebuild there. So that's perhaps the support-sided take. Here's the absolute opposite end, potentially unhinged J3, comes through and says, I've seen a lot of promises, quote-unquote, instead of results. Actions speak louder than words. Also, self-healing to DPS/tanks is a dumb thing to do. They added that to WoW and it fucking sucks. Stop babysitting quote-unquote supports and let them do their job. Heal. The team is supposed to protect those healers. I also feel like they're babying and dumbing down this game too much. Stop protecting the bad players. Let them learn from their mistakes and get better. They also want people to have more quote-unquote teamwork. But yet there's only one, or if I'm lucky, two people in voice comms. Plus, self-healing to all heroes isn't to fix teamwork, seems lazy. Let me add that they did take away gold medals, seeing your opponent's rank, and even seeing your own rank at the bottom. I love this game, but I see this game going downhill. There's a lot more I can say, but I'm not going to write a book, he says in a tweet that's already longer than the text limit and is only able to be this long because of Twitter+. Expect more variety, lol. P.S. There's no 5-stacking in GM next season. So many complaints there flagged up by J3. Obviously, he thinks the role passive thing is going to be a bad idea. He doesn't think that this has anything to do with teamwork. He's clearly dissatisfied with the level of teamwork in Overwatch at the moment, and he thinks the game is being dumbed down too much, both in terms of balance, but also in terms of features like gold medals and people not being able to see each other's ranks, etc. And the stacking not existing in GM. So let's just talk through some of these and then we'll actually go through the director's take itself. So I've already talked about how I feel about Slasher's stupidity. The one thing I want to talk about with Aaron's tweet is that this is definitely a really badly worded tweet for an announcement that should have been a good thing. We'll again elaborate on it in a moment, but I generally think that Overwatch experimenting with things is a good thing. I think it's a good idea for them to try new things, even if those new things don't always work, because personally, I think Overwatch is not it right now. Like, I don't think this current version of Overwatch we've had in Season 8 is what we need to be like an awesome game that everyone's going to enjoy. I think it needs changes. It needs freshening up. So I encourage the devs to do more of those things, and I will not attack them for trying things. That being said, Aaron phrased this as badly as he really realistically could, because the way I would describe his way of delivering this news, he's clickbaited himself. So if he launches this director's blog and he says a part of many changes that we're making in Season 9, and he says one of those changes is self-healing, but we're also making a bunch of other changes and we're gonna, fix this, fix that. It's all part of an address of damage spike and overhealing and blah blah blah, and then some creator was to try and make the most clickbait video out of it, they would title it, or a tweet or a Twitch stream or something, they would title it self-heal passive for all roles ? Like, that's what you expect someone else to do to Aaron's blog, not Aaron's doing it to his own blog. The reason I call it clickbait is that it's kind of misrepresenting in a catchy but not fair way what is the substance of what he's talking about. So he's done himself a disservice, because that's exactly how you make people get more emotional than is necessary, right? The reason clickbait is effective is because it gets people being like, what? They're adding the healing passive for everyone? What is this nonsense? And then you're like, you want to read further, and you're already angry though. You're already coming in with the POV that the devs are clowns that don't know what they're doing, because on the face of it, that sounds like a terrible idea. So unfortunately, Aaron maybe was just trying to generate some excitement, but instead, you never want your own audience to come away with a half-baked version of your own bigger idea. You never want your audience to potentially read this tweet and not click on the blog and come away with this idea that they're just blanket adding the self-healing passive for all roles, and it's like going to be done in a dumb way. So never clickbait yourself, right? Lesson here for Aaron Keller. On ML, I feel his pain. It seems like the support role in particular has now been the subject of so much scrutiny that everyone is unhappy. The support players are unhappy. People playing against supports are unhappy. So they do need to think about something holistically. And I have been on that train from the go, basically, that the role passes were a nice idea, but aren't working and should go, right? So I'll never argue against this idea. I've been one of the first people to kind of go for it. So I do think that they should remove the role passives and try again. And in the podcast, funnily, we discussed the idea in previous episodes. We've discussed the idea that like they might just give the role passive to everyone. And now that's kind of what they're alluding to. And I do think the community is overreacting. I'll get into that in a second. I think the community is overreacting quite badly. But let's first address the points that J3 has made. I don't think this is inherently a dumb thing to do. Cards on the table. I think they should experiment. I think there's no harm in trying this. Yes, like the thing is now as well, Overwatch isn't even tied to Overwatch League, so they can make more experimental stuff even in the comp mode. Because previously you might make the argument that, hey, if they add like a big change, you're potentially jeopardizing people's careers, right? In the Overwatch League, and you might make for a really wonky Overwatch League final or a World Cup final or something. None of that's happening right now. Even if you change in comp, it's only really affecting people's fun. Like, yes, there is still a pro scene, but in realistic terms, it's just gonna affect people's play experience, but not like their livelihood or anything. If you think about how the support passive kicks in, it takes a while, and while of course it is a big benefit in duels, because you can hide for a second and self-healing starts kicking in and allows supports to use their cooldowns more aggressively, or maybe they might have to be a bit more cautious, Ana being a great example. It still takes a bit to kick in. It's not really something that would help a tank massively, and especially when we're talking about in a diminished form, right? So it's like a diminished version of the passive. Mostly it's just a quality of life change that's like gonna help sometimes and will very unlikely to be helping in combat. Right? Because again, yes, you could sit out. I think like, again, it's mostly like a quality of life change for flankers, I think. Like if you're like a tracer and you're trying to get at a backline, you blink in, you do a bit of damage, you get poked back, and let's say you go down to like 70 HP, right? Let's say, and you don't want to burn recall, you've already burned recall, or your recall brought you to 70 HP, right? Your option is, okay, I gotta go blink over to a health pack now, which is gonna take time out the fight, or I gotta go back to my support's LOS or hope that they come around my way. Now you can kind of have the other option of like, I can poke more safely and start self-healing again. And it might not be a lot. You're not going to go from 70 to 150 very quickly, but you can go from 70 to like 100 right? And that's not a huge buff per se, but it's just like helping. And I don't really think it's going to manifest in the way that people have seemingly jumped to. People seem to have jumped to this as being some sort of like, no one will need to heal anymore. And that's just not true, because in the middle of a fight, support's healing is still going to be the thing that saves you from dying. Now, this is not going to save you from dying. If someone's fighting you, it's never going to be a factor. If someone's actively fighting you, it's never going to be a factor. It's more a factor in staying in a fight longer. And occasionally in like a 1v1 kind of duel, it will give you the extra 10 HP you need to win. But again, if you're dueling a support, they're presumably healing more than you. So it's not going to swing the fight in your favor. It's just going to potentially even the fight a little bit. And yes, it's causing a ripple effect that is another layer of balance that is not good. And for that reason, I think it's not a great idea, just because my initial problem with the role passives is that it benefits some heroes and really doesn't benefit others, right? So the boop benefit is more needed for some tanks and less needed for other tanks, and in general is making it frustrating for heroes that want to get environmental kills like Wrecking Ball or displace people like Wrecking Ball. And then the DPS passive is like non-existent on Hanzo, but really beneficial for Ashe. And even the support passive is like really great for Ana, not something that Mercy even ever, like, she already had a version, right? So the problem is, while you create this role passive, it doesn't help the role unilaterally. And this is just adding to that level now, right? Like, now that problem is multiplied, because on top of having the DPS passive, you now have the support passive. So let's say you're Genji, for example, right? You benefit from the reload potentially. You now also benefit from the healing, whereas Hanzo maybe benefits from neither, right? So Hanzo doesn't really want the reload speed increase. Well, it doesn't affect him at all. He's not often in a situation where he's taking that kind of poke damage. He's usually getting engaged on, or he's getting out-sniped by someone across the map. So what it's doing is not what it should do. It's not really going to help balance the game anymore. It's just going to make more wonky balance points, where now flanking DPS will get a benefit. You know, stationary DPS who already are near their supports won't. So let's actually look at the controversial blog in question. So I'm just going to skip over to the more interesting parts. So one thing that Aaron talks about, the game should always evolve with new systems and features that serve our players. And this, I think, is a correct concept for the devs to hold, right? I do think the game needs to evolve. I do think we need big changes. And I do think it's a good idea that they keep trying these. So they're talking about like, there's no other FPS when a team works together. There's no other FPS like it. I think one thing I'm noticing about the general developer communication, they have started to lean into what they think the community likes Overwatch for, rather than what they think Overwatch is for and about, if that makes sense. Like, I've noticed the way they've changed things around a lot, and we'll talk about the Quickplay Plus in a moment. Yeah, so I want to talk about the Quickplay Plus feature in a second, and I think this is another great example of them approaching the game based off of what they've heard people say they like Overwatch for. So we'll talk about the Quickplay Plus in a second, but this whole like, oh, Overwatch is a team-based game and there's nothing else like it when you execute a strategy together. I don't really know if Overwatch has been this for a long time. I've played a lot of Overwatch, and yes, I don't stack with my friends, but I don't think a lot of people do. I don't think the majority of people play in a stack. I think the majority of people play solo queue. I think it's best enjoyed as a stack, but I think most people generally play online games solo queue. I don't think Overwatch has been played like this for a long time, but I think this is what people say is Overwatch's greatest strength, that it is a great game when played together, but most of the time it's just like 5 people vaguely working together, and more often than not fighting against each other. Like, you're kind of wrestling with the stupidity of your own teammates to try and make some sanity occur. In my experience, maybe my experience is wrong, or maybe my experience is not representative of what the average player plays, but my impression is that it is actually how most people play the game. So I don't know if this is true, but I think this is what they think everyone likes Overwatch for. Like, I guess on like their market research, they've heard enough people say that like, we love the team play elements of Overwatch, that's why I prefer it to an Apex or something. Right? The reliance on teammates can simultaneously be one of the best and worst attributes of our game. We want to improve this. We want to improve this by looking at the game through the lens of teamwork, making it easier for players to be a part of the team, while also lessening the pain of when it's not happening. Now, while that's a good goal, I don't know if that's really possible in the way that they're talking about. So yeah, they're talking about like how the spawn together in the team ping system encourages this. I don't know if it does. Again, is spawning together teamwork, or is it like you're just all here now, right? Like, I don't think I agree with that as a sense of teamwork, as much as I think it's just like stops people from being completely headless, because like it forces them, without them realizing, into roughly playing a little bit closer. I think like if you really wanted to make teamwork emphasized in Overwatch, you would remove a lot of the stacking restrictions, which they are working on in Season 9, although I think GM will still have its restrictions, but more people can stack together. That's a teamwork focused change. I think you could make team leagues or weekend tournaments or any number of things that encourage you to find some friends and stack up. The group finder is still missing in Overwatch, which I know a lot of people have lamented the loss of. I think those are more valuable teamwork orientated changes than spawning together, for example. So one thing Jeff talks about is party frames, which I think will be good. I think people have asked for this for a while. There is a, again, question of like, does it make the UI too cluttered? But I think it's fine. I think you kind of know this kind of feature in many other games, especially like MMOs. So I think this is good. I think this would help potentially. This is one of those things where it's like, it doesn't make you necessarily want to teamwork better, but it makes it easier to keep track of what your teammates are and what they're doing. It's like a nuanced point that hopefully makes sense and I'll elaborate on. Because for example, if you're really good, you don't need this. If you're like GM top 500, you can already tell who's alive and who's dead, roughly speaking. You know, not always, sometimes you get it wrong. But roughly speaking, you've got enough of a vision of the battlefield and the kill feed to know most people are dead. I shouldn't ult right now, or I shouldn't engage right now. So it doesn't help anyone on the high end be more team oriented in any way. What it is a low end push up, right? So for the bronze players who don't keep a good track of the kill feed, who don't have a good awareness of the fight, it's another feature that potentially helps them find out, okay, everybody on the party frame is dead. I'm on my own. So it's not necessarily going to make teamwork more prevalent in Overwatch. It just makes it so that the individual has an easier time of trying to keep track of their team. I've been playing this game since closed beta Overwatch 1. I have like 5k hours in ranked, have mostly hung around Masters GM, and I literally only ever solo queued. And I've always wished they would implement more to empower the individual being able to carry themselves if they're good enough. I am the player these ideas are for. Yeah, they kind of seem to go back and forth between this is for you to self-carry and do what you want, but also it's a team game. Like my conversation with Jared recently, he seemed to want to emphasize a lot like it's a team game. You sign up to play with your team. It's not a solo queue thing. So I think they're starting to lean into the team play thing, but then they're also kind of cognizant that most people play solo. And so they're trying to make features that essentially make the solo player's life easier, but under the mask of like, we want you to teamwork more. So they're trying to have their cake and eat it too a little bit. Let's see how it plays out. So one of the other things they talk about is map voting. Like Aaron flags this as a thing that they've considered and they've talked about. Whether they do it or not, I don't know. I think map voting would be good. I think there's like arguments for and against. So the argument against it is that queue times can get effective, right? So queue times can potentially be bummed off for maps that you like and other people don't like. Also an argument of like, if you're competitively good, you should be able to play on every map and adapt versus being able to focus in on the maps that are only good for your heroes, for example. But I think map voting is generally good just because your player experience should be better, right? Like you want players to have fun and enjoy the things they want to enjoy. No aspect of your game should feel like a chore. You shouldn't feel bad. Oh, I'm on this map. And you will for some maps, but en masse, the community shouldn't feel this way about half the game, for example, right? They shouldn't be that like half the maps are viewed as bad and people don't want to play them. And this will really help them hone in on what maps people like and don't like. Like, yes, we know they like King's Row, but what else do they like? What else do they not like? And that should give them a lot of data. This is what we need to change about certain maps. Like maybe there's a certain game mode that people don't like. So yeah, it might be that like certain modes are voted for less, like push, for example. Like maybe people will be like, we don't like push, stop giving us push, which gives them an idea that like, hey, there's people that don't like push for X reason. Or it's just specific maps that people don't like, the Havanas, the Circuit Royales with the long sniper sightlines. And then they know, okay, looks like people don't like sniper maps. Like we wanted to make sniper maps for those heroes to be good, but actually the community doesn't like them. So let's either change them so that people are less frustrated by them, or let's stop designing such maps, or let's make snipers less of a problem, etc, etc. So I think it's a good feature. I did not get to play Quickplay Hacked. I was still on my break for the weekend that they added in Quickplay Hacked. I, had some group chats. People were talking about it. Let me just summarize for those who maybe missed it as well. Respawn timers were faster. Payloads were moving faster. Objectives captured faster. Objectives scoring was faster. And match times and extensions 30% shorter. It's still live. I thought it says till January the 14th. Okay, so apparently it's still live, but right now I'm just going to talk about it rather than playing it. I have not played it, so I can't comment in terms of playthrough, but I think it's a good experiment. Is it good for the game? I don't know. The developers will know more internally whether people are, let's say, playing more quick play games, more time spent playing quick play, less time spent playing quick play. So I don't know what the data is in that sense, but I think it's there. It's a good thing to try and experiment with. Like, you should try these things. It's obvious what they want to happen, and this is another thing that goes back to that point that I made earlier about, I think their approach to the game is what they think people are liking about it. So again, in my communication in my call with Jared, he said, hey, look, the reason people like Overwatch is because it's not a MOBA where you're locked in for 40-45 minutes, or even like a Valorant game. You're not trapped in this game that you potentially don't like anymore. Like, you're halfway through the game and you're like, I don't like this anymore. So I think they are understanding that, like, where they can try and find a niche in the market. So again, it's interesting because Jared said that we aren't really competing with anyone. We're not competing with Valorant. We're not competing with Apex. We're our own game. We're just like a completely different thing. But it's also very clear they're trying to squeeze themselves in to where they think the gap in the market is. And they think the gap in the market, if you to summarize all these changes, is a quick team-based game. So a team-based game that lasts 10 minutes max, where you can play all these heroes that you want to play, you know, coordinate and pull off cool plays, but if it's not going well, it's over before you know it. So that's clearly the aim they're going for. They want to, like, they're trying to see if a faster Overwatch is better, because then people will feel less frustrated about being in one-sided games, for example, right? If the matchmaker complaints are often that games are very one-sided. So this is like a, oh, well, you're not in a stomp for long. If the payload moves faster, the objective caps faster, you could be out of a one-sided game in like less than 5 minutes, which you already can in extreme versions. But in anything under extreme versions, it's going to take you like 7-8 minutes, but that 7-8 could be like 5 or 4 minutes. So maybe you won't even remember the really bad one-sided stomp, and you'll only remember the games that were close, because those are the ones that actually take a little bit longer. It would fit in with the whole line of argument that J3 made, for example, about it potentially dumbing down the game, because it means that there's less time to potentially swing things back, right? It means that if you get an early lead, that's all the more likely that you just win, because maybe an early lead translates to a really big objective advantage that can't be taken back, right? You lose the first fight on a control map, you're basically almost done. You lose the first fight on push, it's so deep in towards your territory that you maybe never turn that around. So TLDR on the Quickplay Plus, good idea to experiment with. If the player base plays more as a consequence, I'm fine with it. I have ceased to care about what I view as the vision of Overwatch as what it should be, right? Like, I no longer come to Overwatch with the approach of like, I think it should be a really competitive game about strategy and blah blah blah, like whatever, man. I'm just happy to see how it manifests. I just want it to feel fun, and whatever the community is enjoying, I'm okay with it. So if the community is like, hey, actually I like playing this Quick Play Plus and it's better for me, I'm okay with it. And if not, I'm okay with it, as long as they don't create a system that is just miserable and they obstinately stick onto it, as they have done sometimes in the past. So that concludes the director's take, which obviously has shaken up the Overwatch scene right now. I'm gonna take it to my man Samido for a weekly 5v5 rant, and I bring it up because it is once more catching momentum. I see it a lot more often now than when I had the 5v5 6v6 debate with Samido and Hawk. It was only like a few fringe elements of people that were talking about bring back 6v6, I think, in my anecdotal perception. Since I had that debate, and maybe I'm part of the cause because, you know, we platformed a idea and people were like, yeah, actually, I think this is true. I don't think it's a bad thing that I did that, because it's not a bad idea. Like, it's an idea. Is it a practical idea? I don't know. I don't think so. But it's a valid idea. And I think I'm seeing more and more people feel like the answer is 6v6. And Sam refers to the Ana nade nerf, which says Ana nade is going to be continuously nerfed when it's the least problematic support ability in Overwatch 1. Ana has been my favorite support since she came out, and yet, because of 5v5 role queue, it's all nerfs when she is the most fair support in the game. How much more must we see? So I've seen, obviously, Hawk, his 6v6 buddy chime in on this. I've seen other people chime in on this and say that, yeah, this just cannot be done in 5v5. Like, you just can't make these abilities fair. It needs 6v6. To my feelings on that, again, I think it's just a different can of worms. If we're gonna keep mixing things around, we may as well try a third new thing. Like, usually I'm not a fan of like Overwatch's approach, which is that we have problem A and solution B, and rather than just accept solution B, they go for solution C or D. In this case, I'm actually on board with C or D because we've tried A and it had problems. We're now on B and it's had problems. So B plus or B.5 or C is an answer I'm more inclined towards than going back to A, where, again, do you really trust this development team to get it right? I have to say, we haven't even talked about the latest patch notes. I'm not going to go through all the patch notes because I'm sure by now it's not news to you guys, it's news to me. I want to put on record that I no longer have faith in the current balance team. It's not that I had tremendous amounts of faith before, but previously I was willing to give them some slack as like they're new. When Overwatch 2 launched, we had a new lead hero designer come in, like Jeff, I forget the other Jeff Goodman. Thank you. So Jeff Goodman was the lead hero designer, and then he has been replaced. And I was like, let's give the new team a chance because they got to figure stuff out. I no longer have faith in the new team. Like, my approach now to the new team is that I don't want to use mean words because they're people and I respect them as people, but I don't respect their work. They're kind of clueless and they kind of don't have a grip on the game, and they kind of just bounce around with solutions that I think are like clumsy at best and misinformed at worst. I don't really think they're going to do a good job, basically. And I've seen from like their approach to balancing things is just like really heavy-handed. Let's just keep making obnoxious heroes good. Let's just keep trying to like make it so there's no counterplay. So again, like just trying to make Orisa good to fight Mauga. It's like, why? Why are we making Orisa good? Why is the answer to Mauga Orisa? Why did we buff Hog so much in the first place, right? That we needed to nerf him. Why did we make Mauga so obnoxiously good, right? Like, it's fine for him to be good, but so obnoxiously good. Why is the rail charge up to 24%, 5% now? Why? It's like these questions of like, oh, we're nerfing Ananate again. Why? The hardest support in the game. Why? So it's just a lot of questions and like a lot of unanswered questions, basically. A lot of like, why did you do that? I don't really understand. Yeah, the pick rate, win rate balance that they keep coming up with is just so bad. It's just like they constantly keep bringing it up. Oh, well, Orisa had a really bad win rate. I don't give a shit, man. I don't want Orisa to have a 50% win rate because that would mean a brainless ass hero is as good as the hardest tank hero in the game, right? Like, that's the problem they never seem to acknowledge in their like, you guys think we're stupid, but Orisa only had a 41% win rate. And it's like, I don't give a shit, man. I hope she has a 41% win rate. Because I hope the people relying on the fucking easiest hero lose. That's how it should be. You should lose a GM if you're running Orisa, bro. Like, it's just how it should be, unless in a very specific matchup, you're like picking Orisa for a very specific reason, which is why it's not like 2%. Someone who is competent Orisa should lose to someone who's competent at just about any other tank because she's the dumbest, easiest tank. So like, yeah, I want her to be bad. What don't you understand about that 40% win rate?